I was speaking to one of the volunteers, and I spoke to a number of volunteers, as I do whenever I visit a National Trust place, is they don't feed the volunteers.
Yeah.
And there was the scene where you had to restrain one of the kids.
Is what you couldn't see. There's two entrances off to the playground.
You broke into an office. What's the worst thing you could do?
Hello, and we are back with some more of that grumpy Gits action. As always, I am your glorious host, Adam Pearson. I am essentially royalty now, but more on that later. I am also joined by my three loyal subjects. First and foremost, the background is different. That's because he's in Spain, I think. He didn't mention it much. He just went. I'm only joking. He mentioned it a lot. Simon, how are you doing, good sir?
I'm very well, thank you, Adam. You've had an interesting week, haven't you?
It has been quite the week. I got to hang out with Prince Charles. I got yelled at by Fern Cotton because I hadn't had a Percy Pig. Richard E. Grant was there. Hugh Dennis was there. Gabby Roslin was there. Tyler West and Kiss FM was there. That's how you know I'm cool. I knew who he was. And all in all, I'm a huge fan of the Prince's Trust and what they do. And it's nice to go to an event where you can sort of pay it forward and help young people be the change that they want to see. So, yeah, and also, I thought your house was nice. St. James's Palace. No offence, bit better.
Yeah, his is worth about 50 million quid, more than mine. So it's obviously going to be a lot nicer. I am very jealous of this because I was supposed to have dinner with Prince Charlie last year and it got cancelled due to COVID.
6 hours later.
So I'm exceptionally jealous that you met him.
He is not in Spain, but we love him anyway. Duncan Casburn, how is it going?
It's going well. I'm just trying. I've had to have a caffeine shot to get past that the last intro to wake myself back up a bit, but I'm okay. Yeah.
I also may have mainlined heroin once I started talking. That's a joke. I haven't. Hello, Mum. Please stop tweeting me. But I'm glad you're doing well, good sir, and I look forward to conversing with you more as the show goes on. And finally, as always, he is the one, the only, greatest editor in the world.
6 hours later.
Chris Lee Smith, how's it going?
It's a mixed bag this week, mate. Family have had COVID. I had a bad cold. But, it's been all right. I got a new camera, got a new desk chair.
That's why you want shinier.
Yeah, it is. I don't know whether is it breaking the fourth wall if I say I'm looking forward to seeing you tomorrow.
That would not be breaking the fourth wall. We're going out. Where some people are dressing up because it's nearly Halloween. As I frequently said, what am I going dressed up as? A fucking grown up. So.
Oh, can I point something out? So I'm in my flat. I'm in my lawyer's flat. That's a bit weird, isn't it? He's got a pen. Have you seen the little whale just behind me? Look, he's got a whale mirror. I thought that was quite funny.
That is adorable, but also a little bit ridiculous. Speaking of ridiculous, segue, Mr. Chris Lee Smith, what are our ridiculous questions for this week?
The ridiculous questions this week are: what conspiracies do you believe might actually be true? Let's start with Duncan.
Or aliens.
Aliens.
I think aliens have probably visited.
Oh, visited.
Yeah, I'm not so sure on the whole anal probing side of things. I think that might be, if you're going to travel this far, really, you've probably got more interesting things to look at. But I think we've encountered them at some stage. I think.
That's a good one. It's not ridiculous. Adam, what's yours?
I don't really believe in any conspiracy theories. I think they're all a little bit ridiculous and are made up by people who are seeking attention because reasons, I don't know. The human psyche is very much a weird one. I do think aliens do exist. I think the idea that there isn't life beyond us in an infinitely expanding cosmos is far-fetched. Whether or not they've visited, like Duncan said, London Zoo, anal probing.
So do you believe they visited or not?
I don't. I think they're out there. I think, who was it that said, we spent so much time trying to contact life on other planets, we assumed that they wanted to hear from us. But I'm not a conspiracy theorist guy at all. It's a globe. Get over it.
The shot of the flat earth. Let's go to Simon. What conspiracies do you believe might actually be true?
So, as a journalist, I belong in a chat group, and it's where journalists like to talk about absolute rubbish, but also now and again some cracking stories come up in the group chat that we can't really publish for libel reasons or whatever.
Okay.
But there are quite a lot of UK and American journalists in this group, and I'm part of that. And what it is there was something that got my attention a few months ago. Now, whether it's true or not, I don't know. Is that we've been operating on the moon for the past 30 years, okay? And people have been up there for a very long time operating on the moon on a regular basis.
What for?
Is this like a appendectomy or?
Yeah.
Just for general research in zero gravity and so on and so forth. I don't know the reasons behind it. I haven't got a clue. But there is some, I'm not going to say evidence because there isn't, but there is some chitter-chatter that man has been operating on the moon for the past 30 years, and that's why we haven't been back, because we're already there. So
we can't go back if we never left.
Exactly.
I could, like you said, because of libelism and stuff, calling bullshit. Like right now,
surely that's something that could be disproven by any child with a telescope.
It depends on how strong the telescope is as well.
Yeah.
The point is that you can get some pretty good telescopes these days that would focus on, you'd see colonization on the moon.
Yeah.
See, I don't believe it. I don't. But
no, I mean that's the thing. I don't know for sure. I probably think it is false. But where the information is coming from these journalists, who are, some of them are way out there. I'm not going to lie. Some of them are respectable journalists as well. But some of them have got ideas of that. They've seen paper. They said they've seen stuff.
Well, it's a good point, because we won't go too deep with this because I've got other questions. But if they were hiding, because they've been up there for 30 years, they aren't going to be wanted in plain view. What would it take just to stick up a white sheet over your whatever it is outpost on the moon so you're not actually spotted?
Well, yeah.
Let's rewind to hiding like space age equipment, which, by the way, in 30 years will be massively outdated, under a sheet.
No, white sheet.
Just on that
white
for
sheet.
A second.
A space sheet.
Space sheet. That's the equivalent of your kids hiding under the duvet and going, "You can't find me." That's what that is.
Which TV character resembles your personality the most, and why? Don't say you. Don't say you. No. Probably Dr. Cox from Scrubs. Oh,
choice.
Yeah, that is a very good choice.
Now, why did you choose that, Shirley? Or Deborah? Or Brittany?
Because he's knowledgeable and has professionalism buried deep down somewhere within him. However, his bitter, angry, cynical nature, not getting paid enough for work that he totally did, more on that later, or not, libel and stuff, often comes through. He's also got a really hot ex.
That's a very, very good answer. Duncan, what's your answer for that one? Which TV character resembles your personality the most and why?
Oh man, I had never even considered this. If there was somebody on TV that resembled my personality,
I can give you a help with this. He comes round every 25th of December.
oh fuck off! I'm not that generous, and I'm definitely not that jolly. I don't know. Somebody once sent me a picture that was like a cartoon of Rob Halford from Judas Priest. And genuinely, the cartoon, it was like, is this you? It was, I'll have to dig it out and send it to you because it was just like, yeah, that's creepy.
Who are the two guys, Geordies on bike? Is it the two Geordie
The
bikers?
hairy bikers.
Two hairy bikers, yeah.
Wow, that's just sent you in a whole other way.
But yeah, I get that feel for some reason, and it's not just because you're bald and you got the beard and everything else. I just think
I look ridiculously like I'm a biker.
a little bit, yeah. Let's move on to Simon. Which TV character resembles your personality the most and why? Actually, guys, after Simon's answer, I'd like to hear your answer on who Simon's like. He can laugh, but I want to hear it still.
I'm going to say House.
Oh, he would, because House is a genius, right? And I'm watching it at the moment, so I hate that answer. I hate that he's given that answer because he's nothing like House.
There's a huge difference. House is generally right.
Yeah, but he is an asshole.
Not at first.
He's a massive asshole as well. So I'm starting to hate his choice less now, I think. Adam, who do you think Simon's most like?
I don't know, because I'm how mean is too mean? Let's think this through.
Do you think David Brent or
a little bit. There's a little bit of, if David Brent and Artie from Glee had a kid, like.
We'll end that segment now. That's the end of ridiculous questions this week.
Now, I had a chat with Mr. Simon Sampson earlier this week about what he was going to talk about, and his exact words were, "Oh, I'm going to go on a rant," and I didn't want to be spoiled, so I went, "Okay, I'm going to stop there, Simon. Just save it. We'll do it live. We'll do it live, damn it."
Okay.
To quote that guy. So, Simon Sampson, rant away, good sir.
Rant away, right. So, most people know that I sit on the committee of the National Trust. And after this conversation, I'm going to be thrown off the committee of the National Trust. And the reason for it is I applied to sit on the committee for the National Trust a few years ago. And the reason I applied for it is because the National Trust is a huge, well-funded organization that can implement social change in this country. Okay? It has the facilities, it has the staff, it has the volunteers, and it has the funds. Okay? And and everything they do needs protecting. All the buildings need protecting, the grounds need protecting, and it is a fabulous organization. First and foremost. That's what I want to say about the National, first of all, most of all. However, they have hit the goalpost so many times that I'm so frustrated on how they deal with a number of, and how it's operated. So, for example, me and Chris went to a National Trust in Manchester a few months ago, and we had a look around. It was really nice, very accessible, absolutely. But I couldn't get upstairs because obviously some of these places are listed. And the staff were really nice. And when I was speaking to one of the volunteers, and I spoke to a number of volunteers, as I do whenever I visit a National Trust place, is they don't feed the volunteers. They give them teas and biscuits. But if the most of the volunteers are 65, 70 years old, and they don't give them a sandwich. And when I raised this with the National Trust, I said, well, we can't feed 500 people sandwiches or soup or whatever. Well, if you're doing a 5 and 6 hour shift as a volunteer, yes, you can. Straight away. You should do. They pay for their expenses, travel expenses, and they don't feed any of their National Trust volunteers anywhere, from what I understand. And there's tens of thousands of them across the country. And this is a £1 billion organisation which would collapse overnight without its volunteers. To treat them better. When I went for my induction to the National Trust as a committee member, it was this National Trust place across the road from Westminster. And they said, yes, it's accessible. And now I know why I got elected to the National Trust committees, because I'm the disabled person, in the wheelchair, and there isn't anyone else to do it. Okay. So I know the reason why I'm there. And I couldn't get in because there wasn't a ramp. The ramp was too steep. And then when I eventually did get in, when they borrowed a ramp from one of the neighbour shops, I went to the lift, and the lift was too small for my wheelchair/scooter. So I couldn't go upstairs into the meeting rooms. So therefore, I had to have a meeting with the secretary of the National Trust in my hotel lobby, which is, and I didn't get to meet any of the other committee members. So they did move the AGM meetings and all the other meetings to Marlborough House, which is more accessible. But the thing is as well, I had to approach members of staff and saying, stop treating me like a 5-year-old, and I had to physically approach them and say, the way you're acting towards me is completely wrong. The way you're talking to me is completely wrong. Please stop it. Because they didn't know how to talk to me, because nobody on the committee or nobody in the trust had ever dealt with really disability issues. And this is reflected at their properties as well. So, for example, we went to one property and they had a lift going up to the front door. The lift had a weight limit of 17 stone. So if you're in a wheelchair or a mobility scooter, some of them weigh 6-7 stone, which means only people under 10 stone can actually go on that lift, which is absolutely absurd. They've got mobility scooters that don't fit in the disabled toilets, which is in some places. It's very scattered on what services they do provide for disabled customers who go to visit these sites. And to find the information and to book it out is quite difficult as well. There isn't an easy access route to it. And I've raised this issue with the National Trust a number of times, and I've just got to the point where I'm so frustrated with it, and they are so deluded with it, that I'm just fed up. I really am. And this is my rant for a few minutes on how such an organisation still thinks it lives in a Pride and Prejudice novel in Jane Austen era, because they don't dare do anything. They don't dare to change anything, and they're scared of their own shadow. And if they do, they get bad national press. And I'm probably going to get sacked from the committee now, and I'm probably going to get a call from Hillary, who is the chair of the National Trust.
If they're not going to change anything, though, are you going to be bothered?
Yes, I am. I mean, the reason I wanted to do this is to implement change to an organisation that doesn't like change. I'm the youngest person by a long way in the committee of the National Trust, by probably about 40 years. And most of the volunteers, you're looking, and this is the other thing. What they should be doing is looking at the future of the National Trust and where it's going. The average age of a membership of the National Trust person is 60 plus or retired. Okay. And I mean, you do get the families, of course, with the young kids who take the families out for a day out as well. But they just don't know what to do with the trust. And memberships have gone up because obviously lockdown, but they also lost, when lockdown happened, they lost almost 70,000, 80,000 members overnight. And then there's the internal emails as well, which I'm going to get told off about as well, where they like we're talking about conspiracy theorists. They call Piers Morgan a conspiracy theorist. And I'm like, no, he's a journalist like me. I mean, whether you like him or not, he is actually quite a decent journalist. And yet they're putting an email that he's a conspiracy theorist along the lines of Lawrence Fox.
Why?
And I'm like, yeah, I know. This is what the National Trust is like. And I am so fed up with it. It's absolutely crazy. It
So
really is.
is this kind of throwing everything at it to see if they change? They'll watch the episode.
And it's just, why aren't the National Trust doing a grand big tour and saying, let's go and visit schools, let's go and work with the communities, let's go and do this, let's do a TV show that's showing the proper inside of the National Trust, rather than George Clark going, oh, isn't that nice, when it's empty? When he does a TV show in lockdown when nobody's there and going, oh, isn't that pretty? Isn't that an interesting room? Isn't that an interesting view on Channel 4, which nobody watched?
Is it a case of modernization, though? Is it because you've said these guys and women and whoever's on there, they're elderly, and everything you've kind of proposed is kind of modernized to do this, do that.
They are scared to change. They are literally frightened of change. And I know this is me ranting, and I know it's probably going to end my National Trust career, either that or I'll probably become chairman.
That's what he's hoping for. That's what he's hoping for.
Oh, I doubt it very much. No chance.
Oh, in a blaze of glory.
There goes my MBE for serving on the National Trust. But no, it's just got to the point where every time I raise an issue with the National Trust, and I've raised a lot, okay, it either says we can't do it because of this, we can't do it because of that, we can't do it because of this. We haven't got the facilities to do that. We can't implement facilities. This is how we've operated. This is how we've always operated.
Oof.
And it's like, oh my giddy aunt, just try and do something good. Try to move on a bit. Try to get young kids involved. Go to schools. Tell them about the trust. Tell them about the horrible places. What happened in these houses? Some of these houses have got horrific backgrounds, and it's important that we know about them. Some of these places are absolutely fabulous. Yeah, I mean, you can have events on the grass, you can have food festivals, you can have circuses on there, you can have entertainment venues and stuff, you can have concerts. No, don't want to do any of that. It's not our criteria. Oh, anyway, rant over. What do you think? What do you guys think?
Well, I don't think we can. We've just wasted an hour ranting about that. We've just filmed 2 episodes with that rant.
And we're back in the room. I think from what you've described and from conversations we've had before, I think they're, like you say, a bit archaic, unwilling to innovate or change or meet the younger generation where they are. And whenever it's ultimately going to be down to evolution. If they can't adapt and keep up with the modern consumer market and the modern sort of like charity landscape, ultimately they'll perish. And you came up with loads of good ideas for revenue and reaching out and marcoms, etc. As well as the obvious problems they're having with inclusivity. How much of that do you think is ignorance? How much of that do you think is condescension? And how much of that do you think is just a little bit of stupidity?
I think it's a bit of all, to be honest. I really do. They want to keep. So, for example, when me and Chris went to the house just outside Manchester, I walked in there and I said, "This is where Red Dwarf was filmed." Okay. And it was the one with the tension sheet and the big statue in the courtyard and stuff. And it's quite a classic episode. So I sent an email to them and said, look, why don't you put something from the BBC regarding Red Dwarf was filmed here? Okay, because it's a classic episode. It's on Netflix. Everyone watches it. Okay. And they went, oh, no, we can't do that. We're selling Pride and Prejudice stuff because that was filmed here as well. And I was like, well, that's not, I mean, I enjoy Pride and Prejudice. I mean, I did.
Here you go. I'm going to play devil's advocate here, and I am genuinely playing devil's advocate. I agree with this, but...
He enjoys it.
I'm going to be an absolute prick here, but they're preserving something of history and presenting it in historical. So there's a lovely National Trust place near us called Arlington Court, and I love going there. And part of the charm of it is that it is a snapshot of time, and it's not sort of diluted and polluted by trying to make it hip and funky and now. It's actually you go there and it's this sort of a snapshot of what the era was like. Is that not worth preserving in some way?
And that's what the National Trust does. Okay, they keep a snapshot of time and preserving it, and it's protected. It's probably a listed building, and it should be protected. But having attention sheets in the shop, or having an iPhone with an iPhone case with attention sheets, or just some information on what else has been filmed here and what else has been involved, is part of our culture. It's part of our history as well. So
That's true.
It's not going to damage the reputation of the National Trust by saying what was filmed here. It'll be more interesting because it will engage more people.
Yeah, not to mention that your idea to get out to see the kids in schools, and this is what you've got at the National Trust. I mean, that doesn't affect a snapshot in time, does it? So
no, and the horrible history side of things is spot on.
It's really interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, it's horrible, but it's part of our history, and I think it should be taught. Why they'd shy away or not want to it? Are these people just... Are they removed from sort of traditional way of life, how everybody lives? Is it the case of they're upstanding and they really don't know what people want?
Well, I had a meeting with Hillary, who's the head of the National Trust, general manager, and I asked her, like, how many properties have you visited? And she said about 260 or whatever it was. And I thought, brilliant. I've only visited like 10 or 12 or whatever it is, because I've only been on the committee, and a lot of it's been closed for lockdown. Otherwise, I'll go to a lot more. And I said, excellent. How many times have you been around those places in a wheelchair? And she said, none. But I went, this is a service you're providing. And she didn't quite get that. And I know that's a bit of criticism from her, and I'm probably going to get an email from her and say, you shouldn't say that about me, Simon. But this is the whole thing. If you're providing a service, why haven't you tried out that service, or had a member of staff, or even me, go around the properties and try out that service to see if it actually works? Because I tell you now, it doesn't.
So there we go. National Trust. Good advice from Simon. There's going to come a point where if you don't kind of adapt, innovate, and change, you'll go. And it's really that cut and dry. And I completely get Simon's frustration and wholeheartedly agree with everything he has said. Moving on, it is interview time. Every now and then, we are blessed by wonderful guests here on the Grumpy Gits. Is that not right, Duncan Cadburn?
I actually reached out to Marie Gensels, and she agreed to be interviewed and to talk about this. And because we, as the Grumpy Gits, don't ever want to be guilty of talking over anybody, what we did was we invited Sarah Boon on. Now, you might remember Sarah from when we did NADEX and we did our live show there. She talked about Spectrum 10K. And so we invited her on as a naturally autistic person to also ask the questions and represent the autistic community, the neurodiverse community going in. So this is the interview as it unfolded. I'd like to welcome our guests. First of all, thank you so much for joining us, Marie Gensels.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. And Sarah Boon, do you want to give us a brief rundown of what you do, Sarah?
I work with family support. So that's probably what I spend about half my time doing. Probably spend the other half my time doing various things, but it's mainly kind of working alongside autistic adults, help facilitate support groups, those sort of things. So that's kind of generally about me and the work I do at the moment.
Now, those of you who've been watching will recognise Marie, and Marie was on the TV show Don't Exclude Me on BBC Two. And amongst the neurodiverse community, there was a lot of concern over the show and the way it was presented, I guess. And a lot of people were sort of jumping on with a lot of questions that weren't necessarily getting answered. Thankfully, Marie's been really open to talking with us. She really does want to set the record straight. Do you want to give us a brief rundown of exactly what it is you do, Marie?
Yeah, of course. So currently I work with my business partner, Katie Lamar at Magic Behaviour Management, and we're an educational consultancy, and we also train around behaviour. We work with so many different groups of professionals. We work with police, social care, schools, parents, families, just basically any adults who work with children, vulnerable children and young people. But prior to that, a couple of years ago, I was a head at an outstanding pupil referral unit, which was amazing, worked there for 10 years. And prior to that, I worked in the mainstream setting, worked in the mainstream for about 7-8 years. So really kind of diverse and interesting experiences that I've loved every minute of. And then on top of that, something I don't talk about a lot actually, but I think now's a really good time to, is my family. I have quite a diverse family. We have a lot of adopted and foster children in our family, and we also have a lot of children and young people and young adults in our family with different needs as well.
Thank you so much. So we decided we want to do this based on the idea that it's so much better to be able to set the record straight and make sure we're on the right track. And, there's obviously some issues that came up as a result of the show that I was concerned with, other people were concerned with, but it's also something that, unless there's a voice given, you don't get a chance to respond to that and actually I set the record straight or whatever. So that's kind of what we're here to do. And to also, I guess, discuss the issues that came out of that. Yeah, I watched the show with considerable interest. So those who are watching, if you've watched my other stuff, you'll know my daughter is autistic. She has pathological demand avoidant profile with sensory processing disorder and a whole list of other 3-letter acronyms that follow her name. And I did watch it. I've got to say it was a hard watch for me, I would say. Not in the sense that, kind of watching Schindler's List is a hard watch, but in the sense that this just really hit home. These kids shared a lot that I see with my daughter.
Obviously, when I saw the programme come up, I was like, I'm definitely interested in this. But I think a lot of the time, I think something I notice is a lot of people focus on the outside behaviour. And it's actually kind of, I think something I've learned over the years, it's so much more important to understand what's going on behind the scenes, what's led to that, what's contributed to that. And I think with the show, obviously you're just getting a glimpse of the outside. So although I was watching it and I had my views, there was that certain extent of actually I'm not seeing the whole picture.
That makes full sense. And I think what's interesting about that is that when we talked about doing the show, we talked about how do we reach as many audiences as possible. So how do we reach the teachers who do not understand that behaviour is a language of communication, do not understand that behaviour is a communication of an unmet need, but also the parents, how do we reach them? So we had to think of a starting point. So it's really interesting because the feedback from the neurodiverse community, I will not sit here and kind of try and defend myself and argue my point. I am so open to anything and everything that will support children and young people. I really am. However, I think what I will say is that it's so difficult because obviously we spent hundreds of hours filming, hundreds and hundreds, but then I didn't have any say about what was going to be edited afterwards, which is part of it. I know that. But what was so interesting is that the behaviour is what school staff see. So they see the behaviour. So when I was talking to the school staff, what I was communicating to them is you cannot react to the behaviour. We need to understand what is the behaviour communicating, what is the unmet need of these young people that we need to address in order to be able to then meet their needs. But that had to be the starting point because some school staff and some parents sitting at home hadn't even reached that point yet. And I say a phrase, no blame, no shame. That means no blaming any adult and no shaming anybody. It's really important, I think. And so no blame, no shame, whatever our perceptions or our thoughts are around things prior, it's okay. But actually what's important is that if that is a starting point, then if the first point of our thinking can be, okay, this isn't just a behaviour, this is a communication of an unmet need. If we can just change our perceptions around that, then that could just be a first stage, a first step. So to me, that's what was really important about the show, because I knew we wouldn't be able to get into the details of everything within 2 hours, but that's what I really wanted to try and communicate as far as I could.
If you were able to make if this was you making the show, what sort of stuff would you have put in there that maybe got edited out?
What I would have liked to see included and what I would have done personally is what we do on our training. So we would talk about, we start by talking about perception. So understanding that wherever you're standing from, every single person's going to have a different perception around what you see. So just the surface level stuff. So that's what we start with. So that's what I would have really wanted to start with, because everybody watching, sitting wherever they were sitting, watching the TV, everyone's coming from a different place. So that would be the first thing. The second thing I would say is about understanding the elements of containment. So when I said these strategies will work for all, what I meant was these strategies, and had said was, every single person, regardless of their needs, has a right to feel emotionally safe and contained. Doesn't matter what your needs are, we all have that right. So the strategies that I use are containment strategies. So there's 7 elements, and that they're all the elements equally balanced and implemented are the way I have worked over the years with external professionals as well, with other professionals as well, in order to support and meet the needs of vulnerable young people. And no one piece of those strategies by themselves will work alone. So lots of people, understandably so, talked about consequences as an example. I 100% agree. If you go consequence heavy with any child or any person, it's not going to work. Of course it's not. But actually, that wasn't the message. The message was, if you understand that consequences, if they're implemented and fairly balanced, and you understand the young person's needs, etc., fairly implemented alongside all of the other 7 containment elements, so that's expectations, attachments, routines, boundaries, all of language, all of those things then equate to emotional safety, certainty from a routine, for example, emotional support, emotional security. That's what it provides. If you provide all of them in equal weight and balance, dependent upon an individual's need, whilst working multi-agency. That's what I would have done, because that's what I do. That's how I work.
What's your response to that, Sarah? Somebody who's been through the education system, both working with it now, but also as a neurodivergent person growing up through the education system, how does that ring with you?
I think my initial response is there's so much more depth than that was communicated on the programme, for sure.
That's fair.
And definitely, I'm very much someone, kind of, when I'm working with young people, kind of looking at a situation and seeing how it can be improved, is looking at the whole picture. Like, if you're just focusing what's going on in school, actually, there could be wider things. Yeah. And, you know, stuff from home can come into school and vice versa. And that was certainly the case when I was growing up. As I know that many of us autistic people, we actually masked during school kind of how we felt, our true emotions. So we weren't, you know, flying up on the radar, but because we didn't feel safe, but when we felt safe at home, that's when we'd show kind of our distress and our true emotional state.
And because masking is such a huge thing, it's one of my bugbears is the lack of understanding of masking in the education system. Something that was really nice to hear was that you have that no blame strategy as well that goes along, because parent blame is something that accompanies masking so strongly. And one of the questions I had was, does containing these behaviours in that fashion basically force masking at school? Is that a concern that you carry? Is that something that you address?
Yeah, 100%. So again, what wasn't shown, because wasn't enough time, is all the training that we did with the entire school staff, the training that we did with the parents and carers, because we always say, or I always say, you cannot just have a bunch of strategies and just put them in place with a child. It doesn't make any sense, because it might work for a period of time or it just might not work at all. And what I'm all about is sustainability, and actually, how do we meet a need? We cannot take away a need from a young person, but what we have to understand is what the need is and how we can meet that need. And there's a huge misunderstanding in schools who don't necessarily understand that we cannot fit a child into the school model. We need to adapt and have this understanding in order for the child to succeed at school. I had so many young people who came to the pupil referral unit who actually probably shouldn't have been there, and who could have remained at mainstream school if the school had created a contained environment as a base that young people, like Sarah's just said, that young people could have felt safe enough in, so that then the adults were then able to understand what those needs are and then meet those needs. So I totally agree with you. Masking is a huge issue, but I think part of the issue is the adults around the young people not understanding that their needs are their needs. You can't take the need away and replace it with, it just doesn't work that way. And I think that's where the misunderstanding comes from.
I think that's really interesting to hear it from that perspective, because I think looking back and conversations I've had with other neurodivergent adults was there just didn't seem to be that understanding. And it was very much, I think it was very much one size fits all on a very systemic level within schools. And I think as long as that kind of dominant, there's always going to be kids that slip through the net.
One of the real concerns I had from the show was that very clearly, at least a couple of these kids had extra needs in that sense. So they were autistic, or they had, as you said, that the behaviours are a reflection of an unmet need, and that need wasn't being met, and those needs are stemming from special educational needs. And it really wasn't addressed in the show. And is there a reason that wasn't addressed?
Yes. So just to be clear, it was addressed as in throughout the time that, well, still with the families now, I talk to them all the time, but throughout the time I was with the families, it was, but you're right, it wasn't shown on the screen. Part of that reason was being respectful to the parents and their wants and needs. And it was very difficult because, and I've got to be very careful what I say. I don't want to say anything that then the parents would be, not happy that I say, but we also have to take into consideration that the parents some of the parents had other children. So the children who were featured had siblings. I've got to be careful what I say, but the siblings, they also had needs as well, etc. And the parents didn't want that to be shown or talked about in certain ways because they were trying to consider their whole family unit.
Well, it's interesting because I had one of the parents, I won't say whose parent it was or which child, but one of the parents reached out to me and say, we are actually aware of their extra needs, and that is actually being dealt with as part of this. I didn't want it in the show, actually, because I was concerned about bullying being a factor. I thought that was a really interesting perspective on it, and it kind of backs up what you're saying there. It's not as simple as, we're just going with the cameras and we can film everything. You've got so many more people to consider.
And again, you've got to think about, will they grow up and will they be annoyed that the whole world knows that they've got these conditions or not? So I think from that perspective, it was the right call not to label it.
I've had so many young adults, which I wasn't expecting actually, contact me, and very similar to your story, Sarah, actually, so that's why it's really compelling to listen to, have said, I had an awful time at school, but I didn't want to be labelled, which is understandable, that's fine. And there's some who have said, oh, I wish that I could have spoken about it or someone could have spoken about it. But one thing I do feel that I should say, still being respectful to, of course, the young people and their families' wishes, I do feel that if I had my time again, you asked me this question not too long ago, Duncan, I do think that what I should have said in a sentence was, to camera, was maybe just a sentence or a short paragraph around understanding that unmet needs can be SEND needs, they can be these needs, they can be those needs, and just go kind of giving an overview of what those underlying needs could be, because they're not always SEND needs, there is other needs as well. And I feel that in reflection, I should have done that. So I just wanted to say that.
I do want to address one thing that happened in the show, and it was one of the most difficult moments for me. And I'll preface that with an explanation. I have to restrain my daughter quite regularly. My daughter's very violent and aggressive when she's in meltdown as part of PDA, and I've got other people I have to consider. My son's only 6. My wife is quite ill, and if she's going to be throwing things at people at risk, I have to be able to contain her and restrain her in that way. I've been trained in self-restraint. And there was the scene where you had to restrain one of the kids. And I'd like to hear what your perspective is on that first.
So again, prior to that, so I'll explain it all. So prior to that, it wasn't captured on the cameras simply because cameras weren't rigged in the classroom. It was literally someone with a camera. So whenever something was happening, they went to where it was. So something had happened which was really dangerous in the classroom, and he had come outside of the classroom. He tried to get back in, but he ended up being in the playground. Now, lots of people, understandably so, were saying, he's in the big open play. Sure, he's safe in the playground. Again, a couple of things. First thing is what you couldn't see. There's 2 entrances off to the playground, which, again, you cannot judge in that moment what a child has done previously when you're making a decision whether to physically contain them or not. So just to stress that. So I wasn't thinking, previously he's ran off and done this so that he might do that. That wasn't the case, but just to explain that scenario. But what had happened is in the playground, there was another boy. Again, I'm not going to say too much about that boy out of respect for him and his family, but he had thrown a ball at that young boy. Then he had kind of moved backwards and almost tripped over the bucket that was on the floor. So putting everything together in that moment, and I could see he was ready to flight. So putting everything together in that moment, I made the decision to contain him in that moment. So when I made that decision, obviously we're in the middle of the playground, so there was no chairs about. So usually if I'm by myself, there would be a chair, and then you'd place the young person on the chair, and all as you've been trained to do, etc. So that's what I would have done, but that wasn't available in the playground. So I held him in the safest way that I could by myself, and then immediately asked for someone to go and call for assistance. But understandably so, lots of people are saying, oh, but we don't use that restraint anymore, etc., etc. Yep, absolutely correct what everybody's saying. However, a skilled practitioner is able to still use that technique if it's just for a moment, if it's not all the time in a scenario like that. So like I said, if I was in the, elsewhere and there was a chair there or whatever, I wouldn't have. But a skilled practitioner like myself, because I've done countless physical containments over the years, so I was able to judge in that scenario. However, like I've said before, I completely understand that to millions of people watching, they won't know all of that. So they won't think to themselves, oh, Marie, she's a skilled practitioner. So I completely understand that. So I'm not going to argue that case. And I'm going to say that I wouldn't promote that someone was to use the technique that I used. It was just in that moment in order to keep him safe. And the last thing was just to put it into full perspective as well. Again, we did hundreds and hundreds of hours in the school, was therefore probably on and off because lockdowns and bubbles and things, but just under a year, and one restraint was done with him. And it's also important to say that after that containment, because of all of the other work that was done, if it was just that containment, it would have been different, a bit like I was saying the balance before. After that, our attachment with myself and the young person got stronger, because that was the first time for him that he had ever been in a scenario where he felt out of control, that someone else was able to take control of the situation for him and help him feel, oh, someone can manage me in this scenario.
As a viewer, I found it very hard to watch.
Yeah, I get that.
So I felt, rather than judging the situation, I think I was left with more questions of how it got to that. So thank you kind of for explaining your perspective there.
I think that's so fair, because again, as a viewer, of course, I completely understand. So I can't say anything, but I really understand that. The only thing I can say in response is that in those scenarios, it's always well thought out, even if it's very quick in the moment, only because of my experience. So because of my experience, I'm able to think quickly in the moment. But I do understand that not everybody can. So that's why I said I really want to say that I wouldn't promote just go to a restraint or whatever for any other adults if you're not in that scenario. So for you, Duncan, like you said, your daughter, about, you can assess a situation really quickly. But I am very conscious that not everybody can.
I want to thank you guys so much. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us.
No problem. Glad to be here.
And Marie, thank you so much for taking the time and for setting the record straight. And I know that I feel a lot more confident with my opinions now and what I understood from seeing the show. So I really thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
And I thank you too. And really nice to meet you as well, Sarah. Thank you.
No problem.
And with that, we'll hand back to the guys.
And if you want to see that interview in its hour-long glory, Duncan Casburn, where can people find it?
It will be up on my channel, PDA Dads UK. There'll be a link in the description, but if you just search PDA Dads UK on YouTube, it will pop up.
Well, there we go. Great interview. And at this point, where I jump in with my story that I've researched. So I have to apologise to you gentlemen, as I went down a bit of a rabbit hole, and rather than researching my story, I wanted to see how quickly I could complete Mario Brothers 3 on the Nintendo. So it has been like a whole week of perfecting a speed run, and I can now do Mario Brothers 3 on a Nintendo in about 14 minutes.
I have seen a video of this, and the world record's like 10 minutes. So that's pretty good.
I'm up there. I say I'm up there. I'm 4 minutes off. I'm nowhere near. And to a lifetime in speed running. But bearing in mind, I can see. I'm quite impressed with myself.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Chris, silly story.
Silly stories. Well, I've got two. One's a very quick one, which were police called to help untangle 7 baby squirrels after tails got knotted up at the bottom of a tree. That's the first one. A cute one, and I will show a picture for that. It is quite sweet. the second one.
That sounds like kids have been messing about and then they realised you had to call in the fire service.
No, well, they were found at the bottom of a tree, and apparently all their tails got tangled up with each other. So the police came out and they kind of untangled them and set them free. Never heard of it before.
Wait. The police came out.
Police called. Yeah, it was the police. It was the police. So,
crikey! Where did this happen?
I think it was Minnesota, but I'll put up a copy of the article.
Well, I'm pretty sure
it was kind of sweet.
Oh, mate, how much does not need I guarantee proper happens in Minnesota if that's what the police are doing.
It's probably a good thing, but let's move on to the second one. This is a bit longer, this one. In August 2019, Gary Samuel Lambay broke into an office in Toronto, ate some food, left scraps. In fact, before I go on, what do you think he did that got him caught? He broke into an office. What's the worst thing you could do?
Oh, he photocopied himself.
He photocopied, then played with a photocopier, not realizing he photocopied his own face.
Yes.
Realizing the image he was tracked down within a month.
Okay, that's even dumber than what I thought he'd done.
Did you think drive-by something?
I thought he'd really enjoyed the food that he'd had and had called up to ask what it was. That's what I thought he'd done. So, as always, this has been the Grumpy Gits. Thank you for watching, whatever platform you're watching us on. Give us a like, a follow, a subscribe, whatever the correct vernacular is, wherever we are in your internet domainy space. So, from me, Adam Pearson, from Simon Sampson, Duncan Casburn, and Chris Lee Smith, we are the Grumpy Gits, and we will see you all on the next one. Take care.